lifelong Fond du Lac resident, KFIZ before you worked there. What do you have memory-wise of KFIZ, listening to the station, growing up as a kid and into your adult years?
Well, like a lot of people my age, people that grew up, Joe Gazer is probably the number one memory that I have. Being dropped off at school in the morning, and by my parents, always Joe would be in the car with us, if you will. Finding out what we'd be eating for lunch, if we'd have John Marzetti or pizza, and that was always fun, or whatever the case may be, because they would read the lunch menus every day. And yeah, it was Joe Gazer. Listening to Joe Gazer announce football games and basketball games, and listening as a little kid, hoping one day that maybe if I was lucky, Joe Gazer would announce my name on the radio and such. And it was just it was great radio, great small town radio, where you kind of just hung on every word just because you wanted to find out what was going on. It was a different time than today. And the local radio was huge. The local newspaper was big too, and they kind of worked together a bit too. But it was. Joe Gazer, no question, is the name that comes to my mind as a sports guy. I remember, and this is really an example of the small town radio. They used to do Little League games once a week. I don't know, Sean, if you've been around Fond du Lac enough, do you remember Boys Park out by the fairgrounds?
Sure.
So Boys Park out at the fairgrounds on a Friday night, I think it was Friday night, but I could be wrong. It was, I think, Friday, maybe Thursday night. There would be a radio game, and they'd record it and they'd play it later, so you could hear your name on the radio. And the first thing you did as a Little League player was look at that schedule to see if you got a Boys Park game for a Joe Gazer announcing game. And when you did, that was the one that was marked on your schedule as a little boy. And I'll never forget it. I stole second base. True story. I wasn't a great baseball player, but I was fast. And I stole second base, and I crashed into the shortstop for the opposing team, who ended up being a good friend of mine years later, the high school football teammate and the like. And I just remember Joe Gazer said something along the lines of, "He's trying to play football out here, I like it," or something along those lines, because I don't think I slid. I think I just crashed into the guy. I didn't know. I wasn't going to be out. And I thought it was so cool. Joe Gazer knows my name, knows who I am. Of course, he had a roster and he knew everyone's name. But so that was really, really, really neat. And then just hearing it, I remember one day, and this was such an amazing example of what KFIZ was. I was in junior high, and I was going to Tyson. And so this would have been mid-70s, early mid-70s. And showing that times may change, but things stay the same, the school district was in the midst of trying to cut spending on the music programs. And my father, who was kind of a big known jock around town, spoke to the school board the night before about the need for music education and arts education. That was every bit as important as sports and other things, and this is absolutely cannot happen and such. So we were driving to school the next morning, and he was dropping me off at Tyson, and I heard my dad's voice on the radio because they had recorded the school board meeting. And I heard his passion in his voice, and I knew I'm not much for music. I love music, but I wasn't any good at it. But my family was a musical family, and I couldn't believe my father's passion about that. And then Joe Gazer said who that was and that kind of thing. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, because I'm going to school and Joe Gazer's talking about my dad on the radio. And I went in about second or third period, my music class. I will not say the teacher's name, but I love him to death. He pulled me aside. He said, "All right, thank your father, and just don't really screw around a lot. You'll get a good grade in my class." So KFIZ allowed me to get an A in music without really doing a whole lot. All I had to do was keep my mouth shut. So thank you, KFIZ, and for that. But that was you just listened to KFIZ to know what was going on in the community. And those were a couple of fun ones. Those were a couple of things that I remember greatly. Getting a chance to play Little League Baseball with Joe Gazer announcing my name, and then hearing my dad on the radio heading into Tyson one day, and then finding out that I pretty much had a free pass in music class for the rest of the year, as long as I didn't do anything too stupid. So that was great. And then later, what was so fun, I remember having the chance eventually, good fortune to get to play high school sports, football and basketball at Fond du Lac, Goodrich at the time. And unfortunately, by my senior year, Joe had just stepped down from doing the games. So I never got to have Joe Gazer announce my game as a starting quarterback, which would have been awesome. Because again, that's who you grew up. All the guys I looked up to, I heard their names said by Joe Gazer. And that's what I wanted. They didn't get it, but it was still great. And so that was, it all goes back to Joe for people my age, I think.
How did you come to get to working at the radio station?
Like all great relationships and jobs, I started in a bar. It was a funny story, actually. We, the Fond du Lac Cardinals, the year they won the state baseball championship, 2000, they had played a regional, I believe, and a bunch of us went down to the local bar, the Press Box, afterwards. And I didn't know Chuck Freeman at the time at all. I knew of him because he worked at the radio and I heard his voice, but I didn't know him. And we're sitting around, and they're going to play Beaver Dam. And we're sitting around with a bunch of people, and someone said, anyone know anything about Beaver Dam? I think Freeman said, anyone know anything about Beaver Dam? And I knew the coach. I said, yeah, Charlie McDonald. He was a longtime baseball coach. He won the state Class B football championship in 1979, and they got a pitcher going to, I don't know, Indiana State or something like that. Great name, a great Beaver Dam name. His father probably at this stage was the guy that was a leader of a great basketball team back, blah, blah, blah. And Freeman looks around to everyone and said, okay, who the hell is that? And how does he know so much? And one of our friends, Pat Lloyd, one of our friends said, that's Hoffy. He's forgotten more about sports than you'll ever know, Freeman. And he said, okay, just on that. He said, next fall, you want to do a high school pregame show with me every Friday night? I said, all right, what the heck? And that was it. And I got into that. Apparently, I was fairly natural at it. We had a lot of fun. And if you remember, Chuck did like an hour, I believe, sports show on KFIZ, like from 5 to 6. Was that right?
Sportsline. Yeah.
Sportsline, yes. And he never let anybody sub for him. And he let me sub. And so I had never been on the radio by myself. And I don't know if it was you or maybe Wade Bates. And both you guys were so amazing to me because I didn't have any background in it. I didn't know squat. And I think maybe Wade worked the board. I can't remember. And I had to put something together, and I found a book that I had read by a guy that actually one of the last living people that played against Babe Ruth. And he was at that time 120 years old. I don't know how old the guy was, but he was very old. And I'm thinking, I'm going to do an interview with this guy. So I contacted him, and the interview went amazingly well. And I was so pleased because I'd never done anything like that before. And it went well, apparently. And then a little bit later that year, Randy Hopper bought a radio station and was going to turn it into a sports station. And they called me in the office and asked if I would co-host with Chuck. And of course, I mean, sports radio, why not? And that's how I got into it. So all the incredible help from you and Wade Bates and Chuck Freeman and then I also had done a little bit of Saturday morning sports to try to get into it a little bit just because they needed somebody. I didn't know at the time that's where they put people that had nothing else to do in life because nobody wants to get up at 5 a.m. on a Saturday and do sports. But it was my in, so I did it. And I had so much fun with Jerry St. John and Joe Scheibinger. And I wasn't always in the best shape on those Saturday mornings, I can tell you, after some big wins on Friday night going to a high school game or something. But those guys seemed to get a kick out of me, and I got a kick out of them. And one thing led to another, so I ended up on the sports side of things. And then eventually, I think it might have been you, actually, Sean, that said, hey, you should put Hoffy over on KFIZ. And I think I probably had, 13, 14-year run there or something like that, and doing two or eventually 3-hour morning show, and that was just a blast, absolute blast.
What do you remember from? I know it eventually turned into Hoffy's House, right? And it probably had a few different names. Throughout the years.
Yes.
What do you remember just from that? Who were you talking with?
Well, I think from a selfish standpoint, it opened so many doors and gave me an opportunity to meet so many people outside of my own orbit, if you will. You know, got to meet so many people from different backgrounds, and many are still legitimately friends today. So that's one of the things I loved. I grew up, as we were saying, I grew up with KFIZ being kind of, a staple of the community. And I realized I listened to KFIZ when I was young, and I knew my parents did, oftentimes to find out what was going on in the community. I also knew, and not to badmouth anything, but I also realized the newspaper industry was changing. So more than ever, I thought if I could bring to the community what was happening in the community, the event at Thelma, the best play, who's a great player coming in for that Friday night's game. Vince Beagle's going to go to Wisconsin. Let's talk about, you know what I'm saying? They're coming in to play against Fond du Lac that Friday night. Those sorts of things. So I tried my best to keep people abreast of what was happening in Fond du Lac, and all the basics: city managers, the county executives, the police chiefs, the fire chiefs, all those kinds of things. And it was a lot of fun. I want to give a shout out to the late Al Beekle, because he was a guy that was wonderful to me. Because I got to be honest, when I took that KFIZ gig, local politics and the like was way on my back burner. I didn't know. I mean, it had been years. I couldn't tell you the first thing about the Roberts Rules or anything like that. I didn't know. And I wasn't completely up on things. So the first time, and I wanted to have monthly segments with people. I wanted to have Al Beekle in once a month. I wanted to have Tom Harry or eventually Joe Moore in once a month. I wanted to have people from North Fond du Lac on once a month, be it the school district. I wanted to have the superintendents from the area. I wanted to do that. I wanted to present things to everybody. But I didn't know the first thing about a lot of this. So first time Al Beekle came in, I told him off the air, I said, Al, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about here. You got to help me on this. What are some things that people might be interested in? And I want to be clear, I wasn't ever a situation where I was just literally throwing softballs all the time. But I didn't know. And he said, I understand, here we go. And he taught me so much in the conversations off the air. And then he'd explain things to me. So I got to a point where I actually kind of understood what was happening. But it was a lot because of a guy like Al Beekle being nice enough to take time. And those were the best parts, I think, of my times, were the conversations with folks off the air. I had a tendency to go on and on and on a little bit. I didn't hit my brakes very well, which I'm sure caused headaches to my programming directors and the like, because once we got going, we just had conversations. And I tried my best to just make it very conversational on the air. But then so often afterwards, it would just lead to, all right, we'll be back, or I'll be back tomorrow. Next half hour, I'd be sitting there talking to my guests, be it an Al Beekle, be it a Joe Moore, be it a police chief, be it other folks. And we just end up conversing about different things. And that's where I really got a chance to learn about stuff, which made me better at my job. But that was wonderful. The other thing later on, my last number of years, I don't know, 5-6 years, I kind of felt that I needed to do more. And do things that maybe weren't necessarily done in Fond du Lac before. So I got to be honest, there are two segments that I did that I was very proud of, and I was very happy that I was allowed to do. One was a segment we call Conversations on Race. And I was a wonderful young woman who works for the UW Extension by the name of Diana Hammer. And we started doing some things where she'd bring people in that she worked with through her segment, people of color and people of different backgrounds. And we would talk about the experience of being quote unquote different in Fond du Lac, or where they grew up, oftentimes in communities like Fond du Lac. And I was never hesitant to do this. I was excited to do it, but I was always kind of wondering what the reactions would be, because it was, some heavy stuff. And I was so pleased when I'm not going to pretend there are hundreds of people, but there are a handful of people over the years who would come in and say, thank you for doing that. White folks, old white folks, thank you for doing that. I never thought of it that way. I can't imagine if my life would have been like that sort of thing. And I thought, boy, if some people can just learn a little bit about others, that was something I was extremely proud of. And it was quite, I think, relatively speaking, well done. And not that I am a champion of anything like that regards, but I can be an ally and an advocate and an ally. And I also in that role I developed some really good friendships with people who don't look like me, and that was something I was extremely proud of. The other thing I did is I did a monthly segment, again with help with so many people from the community, on mental health, and we talked about a lot of different things. That one actually happened when Anthony Bourdain killed himself. And I thought, this is awful. And I thought, this is something we need to talk more about. This is something that needs to be brought up more. And that I just was going to have a one-off interview, just one time with a psychiatrist or psychologist that would talk about suicide prevention. It turned out he was a part of an organization in town, and I pitched it to him. We want to do something once a month, and they were just, oh my gosh, yes, nobody will listen to us. Yes, we would love that. So that was something I was very proud of too, and I thought that was a great example of how maybe we could expand what we did at KFIZ a little bit beyond the normal breakfast club and the birthdays and all the great stuff. Don't get me wrong, that's Fond du Lac Radio, the small town radio. That's the heart of it. I'm not going to pretend it's not, but I thought we could do things maybe a little bit deeper, a little bit better, a little bit more challenging. And quite frankly, if people didn't want to listen to it, so what? There are going to be some people that are going to want to listen to it, and maybe it'll make a difference in someone's life. So those were things I was extremely proud of. Also, what was great about KFIZ is I was given a lot of leeway to kind of just do my thing. I had great people, people like yourself, people like Wade Bates and Spencer Wagon, guys that were my bosses, but pretty much just trusted me to do my thing. And Randy, of course, the owner too, let you do stuff. So I ran this one for years. I was so happy with it. The travels, started out Wisconsin travels, then it was Friday road trips, and just basically it was a travel show talking to people from Visitors Bureau all around the Midwest. And I got so much great feedback on that, and that was really fun. Wonderful. James Simmers, in charge of the culinary arts program at Moraine Park Technical School, he and I did a Simmers on the Grill segment, a cooking segment, every Friday. We figured we had to do 500-600 episodes. I mean, or 300 maybe episodes. We probably would do 45 new ones a year, and we probably did it for 10 years. And it was just so much fun. And so that was what I really enjoyed. I was given the leeway to kind of have some fun, do some things, hit the heavy stuff, but also make it entertaining, and that was great. And then I also had a chance to announce some games now and then, which was interesting at times, as you could attest to.
Any favorite memories from being up in the booth or sitting courtside for a game?
Well, courtside for a game, I remember it would have been 2002 when Fond du Lac, the year after Travis and Drake Diener had graduated, and they never made it. They made it to state their freshman year when they were freshmen, but they didn't make it, even though they're number one in the state a couple of those years. And that next year, the team wasn't particularly good that year, and it clicked, and it was a magical run where these kids, first of 3 straight trips to the state tournament. That year they lost in the state championship game to Madison La Follette, but they're at the sectionals, and if I remember correctly, Springs were probably still playing, or Laconia, whoever. So all these games going on. So we were doing games at different sites. And Wade Bates was going out and doing one of the flyway tournament games. And Freeman asked me to do color on that. And I'd done color before, but I was normally the B team, And so we were courtside at Colf. And Fond du Lac was just doing stuff, just doing work on teams that were much more highly thought of and much better records. And it was just crazy. I mean, it was probably not very professional on my part, but it was kind of the joy at times. I mean, I'm not going to pretend. I mean, I wasn't doing it for a statewide network. I was doing it for Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And the people that were listening were Fond du Lac fans. So I didn't really care. At one point, Mike Milledge hit a huge 3 and is running down the court, and I stand up and we slap 5s as he's running down the court. And I'm thinking, okay, that was so wrong. But what the heck? I don't care. Cardinals are going to go to state with this team that's barely over 500. And it was so much fun. I remember we slapped 5. I think, oh, man, you are just breaking every rule of radio. But that was great. Back to playing and getting KFIZ notice, one of my favorite things, this ties into me announcing, and you, as you know, Sean, I mean, I pull punches. I mean, let's be honest, but I wasn't afraid to call it like it was. Yeah. And I'll never forget my first high school game as a quarterback for Fond du Lac. We were playing Madison East, and we had a great success. And Coach Jim Johnson was the color man for the game. And if people remember the name, Jim Johnson, Hall of Fame coach, great coach, state champion coach. But Jim did not like throwing the football. That's putting it loose, saying it very loosely. Jim wanted to run, and Jim wanted to take your manhood away, and Jim wanted to physically beat a team up. So I threw 3 touchdown passes that game. And I had thrown 2, and we'd gone down the field running off tackles, and Coach Johnson goes in his gruff voice, I really don't want to see them throw anymore. Run it down their throats, take their will away. Well, I called my own plays. I didn't know he was saying this, but I got to call my own plays in high school. I called a play-action pass and threw a touchdown pass. And all you heard was Coach Johnson going, jeez. So the next Monday, I go into school. My grandmother used to record. I still have those games somewhere. My grandma recorded the games on a cassette tape. So I'd go home and listen to them. And I heard Coach Johnson just gruff as could be because I had the audacity to throw a pass instead of just run it down their throats. So I threw a 25-yard touchdown pass or something. I thought, what the heck, score, instead of having to hand off to him more times. So I go into his class. I didn't have the teacher, but I go, Coach, what do you think of that last touchdown pass? And then he was just, I love the man. I mean, he was a family friend. I respected the heck out of him. I would have loved to have gotten a chance to play for him and all that. But he just like, you got to take their will away, Bobby. You got to take their will. So that's where I came from. So when I started doing color, I was going to say what I felt. And, not to dwell on the negative, but if a team 2 out of 3 weeks gets penalized for delay a game because they didn't get out of halftime in time to kick off, I was going to bring it up. That was unacceptable. And people didn't always like that. But I think for the most part, people appreciated that they kind of heard what was going on at a game. So it was a fine line to walk. But I kind of honestly think when Coach Johnson, I thought, obviously he's got a lot more trophies in his case than I do, and he has a lot more probably right to say stuff. But I thought, hey, I respected that as a player, as a kid. I wanted the guys to be serious and honest. If I threw a terrible pass, let the world know I threw a terrible pass. I don't care. So I kind of did a little bit of that as announcing too. So, and we had some fun doing that, didn't we?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it was a hoot. But I mean, that gets to be long too. Some of those drives way up to. I can't imagine back in the day when they had to go up to Green Bay.
It's a long road trip.
Games would start at 8:00.
Yeah.
It's
a long night.
A long night. But, that state tournament run was a lot of fun. I mean, there's so many. I had the opportunities to announce so many St. Mary Springs tournament football games. And I had nothing but great respect for Bob Hyland. We go way, way, way back. I mean, I was a little boy when we'd be going to his practices and watching. So it was kind of neat. Funny story. My first game doing color for a Springs game, one of my duties as a color man was running down and getting tape after the game. So you run down with a tape recorder on the field, ask a few questions, you bring it up, and then we played it, right? And I went down, and as people know, Coach Highland, he's an intimidating fellow. I mean, again, I love the man, and we go way back. But I went down, thought it was great, went back up, realized I didn't push record. So I had to run back down on the field. And I go, Coach, what? I screwed up. I didn't hit record. He goes, Jesus. All right. So we started. I go, I'm Bob Hoffmaster down here on the field with Coach Highland after a 52-0 win over whomever. I go, Coach, nice performance tonight. He goes, better performance than you. So I think with a degree from the University of Wisconsin, you could figure out how to hit record on that machine. Just for our listeners know, I just already did this. Now I got to do it again because Hoffy didn't remember to hit record. I thought, oh, God. And, of course, it was great. And I I did the pregame interviews with Coach Highland every week for all those years, and I mean, I love the man, I respect the man, but he could not turn down the opportunity to absolutely blast me on the air. So it was fun. That was having to go back down though to Coach Highland and say, "Yeah, Coach, yeah, I forgot to." I'm just glad it was a win.
Right.
If it was like the one loss that you might have every 3 years, I'm glad that wasn't the game that I forgot to hit record. But so that was fun too. And again, the relationships with people. It was the best part of doing all those coaches, players, parents, that kind of thing.
Final thoughts, 100 years, KFIZ, just incredible. What a legacy.
Amazing legacy. And for people like you and I that grew up in Fond du Lac listening to KFIZ, it sounds corny, but, and even now, a few years removed, I'll say it was truly an honor to get a chance to be a part of that. Because this is one of the oldest radio stations in the country. And to realize that there were some really innovative, amazing people in the industry that came before you, and to realize the impact KFIZ had on our families growing up here. And hey, not that people coming from outside don't work as hard or care as hard, not at all. We were incredible. I've worked with amazing people. I mean, crying out loud, Wade Bates came from Wisconsin Rapids. I mean, the guy is born and bred Fond du Lac, right? I mean, he bleeds it. But when you grew up listening, I think more than ever you realized that you had a responsibility to the community and a responsibility to those who came before you that were so very, very good. And heck, like I say, I grew up dreaming of having, I didn't grow up dreaming about having Ray Scott call my name for the Green Bay Packers. I didn't grow up dreaming about having Dick Enberg call my name on NBC. I grew up dreaming about having Joe Gazer call my name. That's what I dreamt about as a little boy when I was out in my driveway. I wasn't, okay, maybe Eddie Doucette calling my jump shot in my driveway, but it was either Eddie Doucette or it was Joe Gazer. That's what I grew up with. And I thought, gosh, that is a heck of a responsibility, trying to follow in those footsteps. And I was proud every day. And the best, again, I was proud every day, and I was happy 95% of the time I went to work, I was happy, which I think is amazing. And we had great people to work with. We had an incredibly fun working environment. I think we did a good job. And boy, just being able to say that we were a part of 100 years of something that special, wow, is pretty cool. So I just know I consider myself very blessed to have been able to be a part of something that special.